Just to kind of go through the intros once again, I'm Katie. I cover technology for Business Insider. This is Olivia Dell and Chelsea Toler. They are the co-founders of Nova Impact. And then Tushar Nadkarni is there on the end. He's the Chief Growth and Product Officer for Celsius Network. So yeah, we're just going to be chatting today about mission-driven companies, why it's important, why it's such a focal point right now. So yeah, I think, we've definitely seen a major shift. Turn my chair so I can see you guys a little bit better. Okay. We've seen a big shift in the corporate world, right, with companies really emphasizing their commitment to social and environmental causes, right? They've really baked that into their company cultures. And so, why do you think there is such an emphasis that employees and startups are kind of putting on company culture? They're kind of making it more of a priority versus an afterthought. So what do you think are the variables in play there?
Me?
Why don't we start with you and we'll go on down.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Dell. I am a co-founder at Nova Impact with Chelsea Toler. It is a private community of next-gen investors, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists focused on supporting impact-driven initiatives. And I am an investor at Falcon Ventures as well that focuses on investing in mission-driven initiatives, or mission-driven companies. And to answer your question, I think that one of the main reasons that companies and big corporations are starting to incorporate ESG and impact values is really from demand from their employees, from consumers, and from kind of people in the broader ecosystem who are really starting to recognize that not only is the world kind of moving towards a direction where climate change is really a big issue now, not in 10 years, but also there is a really big shift towards kind of understanding how impact-driven initiatives can be baked into actual profitable companies, right? So you don't have to make a sacrifice when you're talking about impact. You can actually integrate impact values into a lot of the work that you do in the for-profit sector. And because of that, I think that consumers and employees are really driving demand within big organizations to make those shifts, put their money where their mouths are, and really, hopefully create a better world.
Yeah, I think that, I can speak partly from some of the work that we do in partnership with NextGens, particularly with the UN. And the UN's done a great job of giving us sort of a framework. So beyond just ESGs, there's the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the things that I've seen recently that I've been really excited about is seeing both investors but also startups starting to integrate those goals into what they're doing. So one is, I think we've started to see powerful frameworks that have enabled us to sort of incorporate them into companies and measure them in a way that we weren't before. And then the second thing that I will say is people, right? So I think at Nova, we celebrate various forms of capital. So that's not just financial, that's your time, that's your network, that's your social capital. And we've seen people, employees, kind of take this stance that they're now demanding volunteer engagement. They're demanding that you have a stance on doing social good. And not to say that that wasn't always there, but I think we're seeing a more bold approach from NextGens that are willing to sacrifice even certain salaries to make sure that the companies that they are at, they feel their values are aligned there.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tushar Nadkarni. I manage product marketing, product marketing, partnerships, and a few other functions at. Oh, turn this way. Got it. At Celsius Network, and I've actually had, I guess, the good fortune of working at companies that have been mission driven. And when I joined them, they were really small companies. So I started at Facebook when we were really small. I was, I think, employee number 700 or something like that. We're small. We were a little like harmless little social network in Palo Alto. And the mission there was really to make social connections and connections across the world. And that really spoke to me, and I decided to sort of leave my three-piece suit and management consulting behind and jump onto this company where like we were wearing jeans and t-shirts. No one had any titles, and people were wearing like multiple hats. And we were all sort of in service of the mission of the company. And then I left that role to get into, that was like future of connections, that role to come into a company that was redefining the future of work. And at that point, we were small, Uber, and only operating in the US. And really what spoke to me was the mission towards drivers and creating a platform for someone that just had a phone and an app and a driver's license to be able to just go out and make money, and sort of democratizing that platform for them. So that was the second piece. And then I started my own company, Slingshot. And again, it was important for me to have even a mission for myself, because I was, the whole company early on was party of one, Tushar. And I would go in and try to sort of, talk to founders. And my mission was very simple. I've made so many mistakes in my life, through, just work. I just wanted to make sure when I helped founders to make new mistakes, not the ones that I already made, and help them get to their mission earlier. And that was my mission. And now at Celsius, our mission is to redefine the future of money and get financial freedom for the masses, starting with the first 100 million people, and then getting to the next billion people. And so the reason I think why companies are getting more and more into mission driven or trying to define their mission and their purpose is after a while, employees and people that are working for the company start asking questions on like, well, I know the what and the how, but why do we exist on this planet? And do we need to exist on this planet? And they start thinking about sort of the purpose and the little things that they're doing. It could be data entry, right? Like how does that lead to the grander purpose of like, what am I doing beyond what I do on a daily basis?
For sure. No, I think all of y'all phrased that really well. I think we're definitely seeing this big shift, but I think it's becoming a way for companies to really attract talent and investors, right? To define themselves by a certain mission. And so as that starts, to happen, I think it's become more difficult to kind of find which companies, are actually truly walking the walk and which ones are just jumping on the bandwagon. So how do you think all of you can kind of make that distinction?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we focus really heavily on at Nova, which is kind of sharing your experiences and making sure that if you go through an experience and you've worked at a company and you recognize that, maybe they're not making the most impact that they could be, sharing that out. So like doing the operational work, stopping what you're doing, and then turning around to be reflective on your own life and sharing that out with a community so that you can say, hey, here are the things that worked, here are the things that didn't work, and here's how I want other people, whether they're peers, whether they're mentees, whether they're mentors, to iterate on my own experience. So it's really about kind of like doing the investigative journalism that you do and sharing out your experience and saying, hey, I did this, I worked here, it was awful, it was great, here's how you can make your decision more informed. And it has a lot to do as well with kind of like the access that we have to information these days. And just kind of showing up to be an active decision maker in terms of how you're consuming, how you're investing, how you're showing up, how you're spending your time, et cetera.
I think, I think Olivia's definitely more in the investment for company space than I am. I tend to be more in the nonprofit space, in foundation space. But what I can say is knowing the value of your voice, right? So knowing the importance, to Olivia's point, to take the time to do your research. A lot in the philanthropy world or impact world will say we operate on a timeline of trust, right? So in some cases, ask, right? Ask and people that you know and people that you trust, do you think this company is what has your experience been? And collect that both qualitative and quantitative information and research as you're evaluating where to spend your time, your talent, and your treasure.
What I found is, I think when you reverse engineer your mission, which is we're in this business, this is how we make money. Now let's find a way to reverse engineer our mission. That immediately fails when you go off limit or when hard decisions have to be made. So that usually doesn't work, and employees can sniff that out, right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You can tell where this is just a mission that's created for something for employees or something to put on our walls, right? But we don't live that mission every day. I think the flip side of that is to figure out if the mission is really true. It has to come in direct conflict of another business goal, and that's when the real test is. So for example, when I was doing my due diligence on Celsius, before I joined them, the mission has always been financial freedom for the masses and making a platform that's accessible to all. So I'm like, okay, where can I find examples of where a platform is accessible to all? And there must have been speculation, must have been a hard decision for management to make, and they actually made it. So one of the points that I found several points, but I'll tell you one point because this is like very easy for people to understand, is Celsius is maybe the only crypto company that has a 24/7 call center that allows people to call in, and when you're taking a loan, you can actually go to a one-on-one video call with an agent, and they'll walk you through the loan process. Now this, I believe, now I know I'm on the inside, this was a large operational expense, right? So this was in direct, against direct business profitability to say, well, should we really do this? No one else is doing this. Do we need to have this call center? Do we need to have all these call centers like, for people to support them and get them and handhold them through the process? But if you're truly making this accessible for all, it's a simple decision, right? Now you can find ways to operationalize it and optimize the cost, but the fact of like, this is the only way that some people like my mom or grandmom can onboard onto Celsius. And if I'm really making it financial freedom for all, then it's a simple decision and it's in service to the mission.
For sure. Yeah. And this is perfect segue into my next question, which is, to their defense, companies, they have a responsibility to their shareholders and to turn a profit, right? So how do you balance that with, sticking true to your mission and carrying out, what you need to? And we can, if we want to switch it up, why don't we, you want to go this way down the line?
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you?
Yeah,
work this way.
I think it's, again, if you reverse engineer it, you will be exposed, right? So I think if you start with like, this is our mission, you'll get the right investors, the right shareholders, the right people when you're doing a roadshow, for example, and you're going and finding investors, larger institutional investors, or even retail investors to come on. If you're true to what you are, and that's the mission that people come onto the movement or onto your mission, onto your company with, then it's very simple in every single quarterly call, if you will, right? Because you're talking shareholders, it's a public company. That's what you go back and say, like, hey, we're doing this. I know it's going to be a hit on our near-term profitability, but here's the reason why we're doing this, and then we'll show you the numbers of like how this helped our customer service score, or our, what people are saying about us on social channels, right? So it has to be something else, not just the near-term profitability that helps you serve the mission, right? So I think the more honest you are up front, those are the people that you'll attract and take on with you, and then you're transparent and true to your mission.
I think you did a great job of explaining kind of from the founder side, right? But I think from the investor side, we need to see a shift there as well. And I think we're starting to see that shift. But being educated on the importance of, I'm just going to switch mics. Being educated on the importance of impact, right? And making sure that we are connected to whatever that mission is and that why, and supporting the founders and the team in pursuing that. I think that should be all of our responsibilities, regardless of, if you're an LP, GP, whatever, right? We have to design together a world that we are proud of belonging to.
I completely agree. I'll just say one thing and I'll make it brief, but I think there's a thank you. I think there's a really important shift that we're seeing right now where impact is actually baked into the profitability of the companies that we're looking at. So this is from an investment lens from Falcon Ventures, but it also applies to the work that we do at Nova, right? When we're talking about philanthropy, when we're talking about co-investment, whether it's in seed stage deals or growth equity. There is really a market for not only just having, impact as an employee benefit, impact is something that, you can engage with throughout the company or through the company, but rather like actual companies whose profitability depends on the impact that they're making in the world. So for example, like Icon 3D, I'm sure you all know it's in Austin. It's this massive 3D printed construction company that essentially uses a 3D printer and material science to completely cut the cost of construction by half, and it builds these incredible houses and prints them all at the same time. You can print like 3 houses at the same time in half of the time, with half of the cost, with half of the labor, and the profitability of what Icon is able to do is actually baked in to the material science, to the mechanics of the actual printer, which is the impact, right? Like you're creating impact by not using awful materials and not, polluting construction sites and things like that. So like, I think as a next gen investor, as someone who is a young investor, it's really, really compelling to see companies that are not just saying, hey, you know, we're making $1 trillion a year, and because of that, we have like an employee engagement program. We're giving back. We're matching our employee gifts, but rather to actually look at companies that are where impact is integral to their mission, like you were saying as well, but also integral to like the profitability of the company.
I want to add on to what Olivia said. I think it's really important. Within Nova, part of what we try and educate and help our communities understand is, for a while, impact investment was seen as this thing in which you had to sacrifice returns. And we don't actually believe that to be the case. We think that if you are investing in companies that care and better the world, you can see the exact same returns, right? We just have to support those companies in the right way. And the other thing I would say is, I had a mentor one time say this very bold statement, which is going to sound very scary. But she said, I don't believe in CSR departments and I don't believe in DEI. And I was like, what is this mentor talking about? Like, this is integral to who I am. But her point was that it should be so ingrained in everything that we do and everything that we build, that her dream is that we don't need that department necessarily. We all should be carrying that weight and making sure it's integral in every department. So.
Very well put. I love how you brought up Icon, by the way. I've been following them for years. I think they're doing awesome work. So that's really cool.
It's a Falcon company.
Oh, there you go. Gotta represent. Awesome. So to pivot just a little bit, I kind of want to talk about how I feel like the power is really in the employee's hand right now, as far as, you know, choosing which company they want to be a part of, and, you know, choosing which culture you know, they want to invest their time into, especially, you know, with this widespread shift in the labor market, right? It's the great resignation, the great reshuffle. So do you think that this might mark like a new turning point for companies really focusing on making themselves mission driven, because there is so much power in the employee's hand, you know, to go places?
Let's ask them.
All right. So I think the answer is yes. Yeah, that's the short answer. The way I would think about this is the company and the people sort of running the company, including the employees, they truly have to believe in the mission, right? If they start, if people are putting in the mission because that'll attract investor money, that'll, you know, appease the shareholders, that'll attract top talent, then again, they're not truly being honest to their mission, right? Mm-hmm. It should almost be like, here's our mission, here's what the change we want to see in the world, here's where we feel the world is moving, and here's where we will play in that change, and we'll affect the change. And then the people that come and join them on the movement are truly the people, and they can be anyone. They can be shareholders, employees, any of the people, partners, for example, investors. So anyone that comes on, so I keep going back to that, but I think you have a strong point there, which is, in this world now, can compensation, can things like diversity initiatives, and I put that in quotes because, like, truly people try to make this into a PR statement as opposed to actually doing it. Like, can those things be adequate, right, for companies to just say, yeah, like, we don't really have a mission statement, we'll make you a lot of money, and like we'll pay you more than market rate, and we have all this like diversity goals, and we're going to try to hit the diversity goals. I think the answer to that is no. Now, you're going to attract talent. You're probably not going to attract talent that'll stay with you, that'll believe in the mission, that'll, you know, stick with you in hard times and good times. For that, you truly need to be, you know, you truly need to ask the question, why do we exist? What is the world that we see, or where do we see the world moving, and where are we going to be playing in that change?
Nice. Yeah.
I think he said that very well. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add, other than I just would reiterate the importance of transparency, right? And I kind of said this earlier about like understanding your why, but the point's being made about the mission, right? You should know what your company values are. You should know what that mission is. It should be vividly apparent to you from the moment you walk into the room to the moment that you're engaging in volunteering, that a lot of companies have. So I guess my point is, you know, this term around great resignation is thrown out quite a bit, but you know, with all of these things and with all things that are sort of movements, there is good and bad, right? Great resignation could also mean that those employees then decide to go start their own companies, right? And it could also mean that the companies that, you know, are losing employees are kind of figuring out, how do we become more authentic? What are we doing wrong? So in some ways, things that are a challenge can help restructure, or better, we talk about the impact ecosystem a lot, can kind of allow all of us to sort of reconfigure what is it that we want this to look like.
Yeah, again, I'll make it short. But no, I mean, I think what you're talking about in terms of kind of having more, but what both of you are talking about in terms of having more options than we've ever had before, like I mentioned before, I think having access to information, having access to mentors that don't just live in your city but are all over the world has been massively influential in teaching people the skills that they can develop in order to step into new fields of work, right? So instead of graduating and saying, okay, you know, I studied finance, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, you actually have an entire world in front of you that says, okay, this guy came from management consulting and worked at a bunch of startups and had a bunch of experiences that now inform the work that you do today, right? And so we no longer have to kind of step into those traditional roles of, you know, grinding until we're completely dead inside, but rather there's a really big focus on figuring out how can I work at a company that is mission aligned, which is what we were talking about before, but then also that, you know, has good work-life balance, that has good community, that is, you know, kind of like integral, you know, aligned with what I believe as in my heart, right? Like, because, you know, we spend so much time at work these days. Like, work does not stop in the office because there are no offices anymore, although I know there are some. But we really, like, the office is my home, right? So if I'm going to work at a company, if I'm going to devote 12 plus hours a day to something, I want it to be something that I believe in, that I care for, and that I also have ownership in, which is a whole other conversation. But we'll get to that later.
Nicely put.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I think now I'm gonna. I think if I think about through my career, right, it's probably spanned 25 plus years or so. I've seen this shift truly happen, and it's accelerated in the last, let's call it 3 or 4 years, where all the interview questions were from the interviewer to the interviewee, like, why should we hire you? Now it's flipped. It's like, why should I come work for you? And if you have a mission, you're like, oh, that's an easy answer, right? It's almost like you have to prepare yourself and say, like, well, why should I work for you versus like the 10 other interviews that I have scheduled for the rest of the week, right? And so if you have this simple answer on, like, here's why I came to work for this company, here's what we believe in as our mission, here's where you would fit into that piece, and here's why you should come work for us. The outsized impact that you would have for, you know, in our company versus anywhere else, I think that's what people are looking for. But I've seen the shift from both sides, you know, as an interviewee and as an interviewer. That's a huge shift from, like, why should we hire you to, like, why should I come work for you?
That's awesome that you got to, like, really see that change. Like, that's great. Yeah, because the past few years, I mean, straight out of college, I just entered the job market, and I feel like it's always kind of been that way. It's like, you know, why do people want to come work for you? Yeah. Well, awesome. And I love how, I know the Great Resignation has really become such a buzzword. I totally get it. And I think it is more nuanced. So you spoke, you know, beautifully to that point. So I have one more question. It's a little industry specific. It might be more directed to Tushar, but I think that the Web3 crypto space is just really interesting in regard to all of this, right? I think I spoke to some tech recruiters recently, and they told me that there's definitely a trend of, you know, workers in established Silicon Valley firms jumping ship for cryptocurrency and decentralized tech endeavors. And one of the reasons, you know, that they said people are doing this is because it's like an ideological difference, right? They want to be working for, you know, something whose mission is, you know, developing technology for the masses, you know, democratizing decentralized technology. So similar to kind of maybe the Great Resignation, do you think that trend is going to be a major turning point, you know, in all of this?
Yeah. I think that trend is, by the way, very real. So, and again, I've worked for companies that were in Web 1.0. I know, like, most of the people here would not be, but then Web 2.0, and now Web 3.0. And even when across all of those times, the amount of calls that I get just to talk about Web 3.0, these may not even be people that want to take the job right away.
Yeah.
But just to talk about Web 3.0 has been like exponential compared to all my other. And these were high brand companies in the past, like Facebook and Uber, right? So
Yeah.
people wanted to come work. But what I see now, regardless of whether I'm with Celsius, just the fact that I am somewhere close to the blockchain and Web 3.0 is real. This is, not just people within my network. These are people like from, outside of the periphery of the network and things like that. So that is real. And I see it even more so in Silicon Valley. That's where I'm from. Now, having said that, I think the reason why this is happening, and this is like Tushar data point of one, I'll say, this is my opinion more than like, a fully researched piece. Like Katie, I'm sure you do. So this is my data point of one. I think the reason is that people feel empowered that they, as, just one employee, can affect how the entire industry is shaped. So if you think about it in like Web 1.0, it was more very top down, right? Which is, here are the goals of the company. Here's, where next mid-level management works, and here's what you do as an employee. Don't ask us any questions, go do it, right? And this is beyond the mission and all of that. This was the role. Web 3.0 was much more like, hey, it's all about the users. Let's be in service of the users and the user journey, and like, where do you play a part? But here is our mission, here's where we play, here are our competitors, here's how we make money. It's done. Web 3.0, none of that is written in stone. Today you could be doing something on one of the chains. Tomorrow you could be completely changing that, and like there's no central entity that stops you from doing it, right? So for example, once Google took over search in Web 2.0, once Facebook took over social along with like WhatsApp and Instagram, one piece. If you just came in as an entrepreneur and say, I want to do this search engine, you're like, that game's over, man. Like, social, well, that game's over. Web 3.0, not just is it still developing, but I bet you because it's so democratized that there won't be a singular player that'll own it as much, and it'll be completely distributed. So I think that's the power that people see, and they're drawn to it.
Let's hope.
I think one thing that I would just add from the impact part is I think a lot of times if you feel like, well, I don't know anything about the crypto space, there actually are utility coins, right? We are seeing kind of a merger of this like philanthropic impact concept into the crypto space. The other thing I would just add is if it seems intimidating, I have also felt intimidated by it, but I've learned a lot from advising companies that have a crypto component and learning that way, and or asking, in addition to possibly being compensated as you're an advisor to companies on equity, thinking about how to get that in terms of crypto and learning in that way too. So I would just say, while I am certainly not an expert in it, I think a lot of us have the opportunity, to your point, on still engaging and learning and trying to jump in, and I hope to see more young people and particularly young women try and enter that space.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what both of you are saying. And to go back to kind of this concept of Web3 as the Wild West, it really actually goes back to what we were talking about in terms of young people kind of interviewing companies that they want to work for, especially when you're in the Wild West, right? You talk to a founder, not a founder actually, but you talk to kind of people who have been in management consulting and been in finance forever and ever, and you're like, what do you know about Web3, right? Like, you're still learning this thing as we're learning it because it's developing under our feet, right? So there's actually a really big shift where we're seeing people who can understand how to learn as opposed to kind of how to assimilate to traditional structures are much better equipped to be players in this space where people are making tons and tons of money and tons of impact and are like you said, decentralizing where power is held within the kind of tech world. So I think it's definitely an exciting opportunity, and hopefully one that NextGen can kind of grab a hold of and use their social media skills and search skills to take advantage of. Yeah, in a good way.
And then Chelsea, if you are feeling intimidated after you check out Celsius.network, we are doing something wrong. So yes, and I just want to make sure, because it's crypto and it's women in crypto, so 1% at a time is how we're doing it. So really check us out and tell us if you're not doing a good job, come to me.
And you can video chat their people, right?
Correct.
There we go. Learn something. There we go. Awesome. Well, those are all the questions I have. If we're all done, thank y'all so much for answering all my questions and for the conversation. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you for facilitating.
Of course.
And thank you guys for listening.
Yes, thanks for listening, everyone.